feel caught in the middle trying to parent your autistic or ADHD kids, at the same time co-parenting with your husband and having different viewpoints that really is creating a chaotic parenting process for your children. I have a 4-step process that I have utilized myself in many different areas that has helped our family.
Hey friend, do the daily demands of family life leave little time for self-care? Are you losing yourself in the process of caring for others? Are you ready to make self-care and healthy boundaries a natural part of your day while embracing your roles as a wife and mom? Well, I'm so glad you're here. I'm Christina, married 17 years to a neurodiverse man, mom of 3 neurodiverse kids, and many more roles. Welcome to the Moms and Neurodiverse Families podcast. Get ready to begin your self-care journey. Grab your planner and listen in as we take another small step towards a peaceful, healthier you.
Hey, welcome back, friends. And if you are new, so glad to have you here. I encourage you to look at the show notes and sign up for my email list so I can keep you up to date and give you extra tips about keeping your sanity and your self-care while in a neurodiverse family. Well, today we're discussing co-parenting. This is applicable whether you are married or living in 2 separate homes, or you're divorced and living in 2 separate homes. We have experienced our own struggles, especially when the kids were younger, and the food sensitivities, talking about 2 years old, 1 year old, 3 years old, that young age, and their ability to communicate was very limited. The different perspectives my spouse and I had regarding how to handle feeding and how to handle when a child is wanting to avoid eating food and they throw their food. We had many disagreements on that topic and others, and it took a long time for us to find agreement. And I'm going to share with you the process that I have used often. We do not have agreement on everything. I will be completely honest. There are some areas where we still have continual different viewpoints. But this is a process that I began so that my husband and I could be on the same page. It was something we both really want. Now, why is this important? As a mom, and this is my mom specifically I'm talking about now, my mom had always taught me that the goal is to raise the next generation healthier and better than the one before. That is the goal of parents, is that a parent's goal is that the pits that they fell into, their children would not fall into as well. I am not talking about helicopter parenting where you prevent your child from making any choices on their own and any troubles. What I'm talking about is if you grew up in a situation with alcoholic parents, you do not want to repeat that for your children, so therefore you make different decisions. That's what I'm referring to, is that you are raising them and raising the level for that next generation. And that is the goal, to be passed on to the next generation as well. And also, this method that I have is very simple, and I'm sure there's many other people who have methods out there. Some might maybe even be better than what I have. But my goal was, how do I model and teach acceptable, godly behavior over a prolonged amount of time so that my kids can absorb it? Because as we know, with neurodiversity, it is repetitive exposures and teaching, and eventually there is this understanding of accepted behavior when in a community. Now, again, when living alone individually, the preferences for someone who is autistic or ADHD is completely fine. But we're talking about living in a community. So therefore, when we live in a community, such as a couple in parenting, there are expectations of how do we go about this process of parenting, and also explaining and teaching our children, this is how we treat each other in a community. Now, if you feel like, Christina, there's like zitto, none of this happened in my family, that is okay. We all have to start someplace small. So now this is how I carried out the process. I use 4 steps: learn, implement, explain, model. LIEM, if that's easier for you to remember. So let's use the example of empathy. I realized probably when my 2 oldest were around 3 and 2 that there was no empathy at all. I could watch one child be upset because their toy was stolen, and they would grab a hard item and whack the other sibling. And they would watch her sibling cry and obviously be bent over in pain. And there would be no emotion on their face, no reaction. They would just grab their item, like, okay, and they would just go off. And they weren't even concerned about being in trouble at all. That really concerned me. And as I began my research, my learning, I learned that the ability for some and most people who are neurodiverse to understand other people's feelings, to understand the empathy can be difficult. Now, they can have empathy, but showing appropriate empathy can struggle. So someone who's neurodiverse sees someone else crying, they can feel a lot of emotions, but they might not know how to carry out appropriate actions to show they care for that person. So I began learning about what is empathy and how is it shown in a neurodiverse world, and understanding that they do show it, but it doesn't cross over and reach to those who are autistic or neurotypical. And then understanding what is the normal, acceptable social ways of showing empathy to other people, and what would be something that would still respect them as individuals, as neurodiverse kids, but also help them bridge the gap in being in a community with others and showing them empathy. So I did a lot of research and reading, and also understanding that kids oftentimes who are neurodiverse, they will not see the example that other kids provide. In some areas they might, but oftentimes the empathy, they may not quite click as quickly as maybe other kids. So empathy may be learned at a much later age for kids who are neurodiverse, or it may not be learned at all if it's not taught. Okay, second, I implement. So as I began learning and understanding, I began creating a plan in my mind, and I implemented it. And this is with a plan. My kids need a practical action to do when someone is hurt. Whether just recently, I biffed it at the front door because there was water from melting snow from boots, and I was moving too quickly, didn't watch what I was doing, and I totally biffed it. And what I'm going to be talking about now, that same process carried out even now to this day. But for the kids to know what is a practical thing to do, because in the past it was just staring at the person hurting and then turning away. And that is not how a community works. When there's someone hurt, we come around and we help them. So I had first created a bin, small plastic container. Probably it's about 10 inches by maybe 5 inches wide. It's just a small container. And in it, I put the basic first aid supplies, Band-Aids, Manuka honey, whatever I would need for just people getting owies was in that bin. And then I had soft ice packs in a specific part of the freezer. And what I did is when an injury happened, I would model a dramatic response, like not emotional, out of control, but it was a very exaggerated response. Something like this. Oh no, look at your brother. He's hurt. Oh, we should help him because we love our brother. What could we do? I know what we can do. And then I would go, again, I'm talking to young kids at this point, and maybe that voice and that method will work for some of your older kids as well. But I would then, hey, come with me. And we would go over to the freezer and we would grab the ice pack, and then we would walk over to the cupboard and grab the first aid bin, and we walk over to the person. Those two things is what I want to teach my kids. It's just first, someone's hurt, you need to take an action. And that goal was, instead of having someone's hurt and they're staring at them with unresponsive eyes and they turn away, they have a response to do. They grab the items. And it took about 8 or 10 events, and then the kids began getting those two items on their own. But again, I had to do modeling. I had to give cues like, oh, wait a second, take note here. This is a situation we should respond to. After we had grab the two items, the ice pack and the first aid kit, and bring it to the person, I then began adding in the next step, which was a verbal prompt. Now, in the beginning, it was asking, are you okay? Which, depending upon when that question is asked, can actually receive hostile responses. So we have taught pause and wait and just be there. The ministry of presence, just be present there. And then ask when a few moments have passed, how can I help? Teaching that second step gave them a way to verbally express. Now, as my kids grow up and they're in other communities, other friendships, they will have a process down and that they will be able to show empathy. Where in the past, they just staring, if when you're 20 years old, 25, 30 years old, and someone's injured and you just stare at them very just non-responsive and then you just walk off, that will hurt and damage relationships. So now my kids understand a practical task to do in an emotional moment, because it can be very overwhelming for a kid or a neurodiverse adult to see someone crying, maybe screaming, doubled over in pain. That can be hard for them because there's sensory overload from the sounds and then the question of what to do. And if they're an adult, there can even be, well, I did X, Y, and Z one time and that person got mad at me, so I'm not sure what to do anymore. So this is giving them a process. So implementation does take time. Now, the next step, E, explain. After we had this pretty well down pat with the kids, and my spouse may have observed this happening, I would find an optimal time to talk to my husband and say, hey, this is something we've been working on. I want to share with you regarding injuries and helping the kids with empathy. And my husband saw very clearly the need for this because he was shocked to see one of our kids, when they were very young, would just walk up and they would be upset about something that happened 3 days before. And they would walk up and just hit their brother. And it shook him like, where is this coming from? So we had to go ahead and find this way to model. And so I explained to him, answered his questions, and then sometimes he would give me feedback and we would make tweaks to the process that we had based upon the feedback. Now, final step, M, model. Now this took a range of time. It all depends upon what type of process you're trying to carry out. I feel like it took a month for this to take place. There's other things we've tried to implement that have taken 3 months to 6 months. But this one here is about a month, and I would model to my husband like what we had discussed. And now the kids were at a point where they understood like, oh, someone's hurting, and I would not have to keep saying, oh no, look at your brother, your sister, they're hurt. I wouldn't have to do that anymore. I would say, hey guys, can you go grab? And then they would know what to do. They would go grab the items and they would bring it. And as my husband saw that, he would be part of the process as well too. And he would say, hey, go ahead and go grab the first aid kit. Now this is where I knew it had become part of the whole family process, because at one point then my husband says, you know what? We need to label this. So it's still labeled today. It says the ouch bin. He put that on there because the kids would say like, I have an owie, I have an ouch when they were very young. And so he put that on there, especially since our youngest at that time, I think he even put like a face that looks like it was painful on it. Like owie. And our youngest knew like that's what that represented even. So even if there's other things in our cupboard, they knew what that was. And to this day, we still have this going on. So when I biffed it royally on the water, everyone came running and asking how I was doing. And I mean, so this is amazing to me that everyone in my family would show empathy and concern and ask follow-up questions about how I was doing. That's beautiful. And I think those of you who have seen this in your children, like not show empathy, you know how amazing that is. Okay, real quick, I want to just take a next level for this, an example of doing LIEM, and that is regarding one sibling hurting another sibling. So for example, I mentioned how one of my children would be playing with a toy and another child would want it and they would hit their sibling and grab that toy. And as their sibling was crying, the other sibling was just happily playing with their toy. And like, nope, they got what they wanted. They got the toy. They were fine. What I had to do is learn, like, what is the thought process? What are they thinking? Why do they think this is okay behavior? And in their mind, they're getting their needs met. I want that toy. I take it away. My problem is solved. Because they're not seeing the situation correctly. So then, as I began learning this, I began implementing, if you hurt another sibling, and whatever we talked about before, whatever verb that the kids want to use at the moment, they push, they hit, whatever that is, to get that item, that when you do that, there's 2 steps that have to happen. 1, is that you need to apologize specifically for that. Like, I am sorry for hitting you and taking your toy. It's not like I'm sorry. It's specifically addressing what is it that you did. And this is important because as an adult, when we're making amends, we're trying to do is model right now making amends. We specifically, it is more meaningful and connecting when someone says, hey, I'm sorry for dismissing your idea before. That was not what my goal was. That is healing and restorative compared to, hey, I'm sorry. There's a difference between the two. After saying sorry for the specific action, the next step we take is that the child who hurt the other, that child must do a serving, loving action for the other sibling. And this is for two different reasons. One is I want the child who was hurt to have the last reminder of the situation that something kind and loving was done for them by the person who hurt them. Now, I'm not saying like give a hug, because obviously when someone's hurt you, you don't want them to give you a hug. What I'm talking about is finding an activity to serve them. Oftentimes it was evolving chores or physical items. For example, it could be their closet area in our laundry utility room could be all out of whack. And so it's you need to go show love to your sibling by, I want you to clean up and organize their shoes and their coats while they are resting from being hurt. The other part this does is that for the child who did the hurtful action, they are learning to do something that is kind and that is helpful. Now, with these steps, though, there are many times where I had to have the child who hurt others take a break. They may need a sensory break before they could do any of this. And that is fine. The focus is not, it needs to be done a certain way. The focus is the end result is that there's restoration being done. And again, this is not like you're being punished, you need to do this action. This is, no, you've hurt your sibling and we're in a community, a family. I now need you to serve and love your sibling in a way, the way it should be done. Final step will be reminders that we use our words, not our hands. And did that pushing, hitting, whatever, throwing of an item, that was being done instead of using words. So what is the phrase, the words? And sometimes the kids, they don't have the dialogue. And so we need to provide it for them. And it can be, are you really upset that they took your toy earlier? And that might be a nodded yes. Do you feel that was unfair they took your toy? Yes. Okay. Let's talk about how we can say that to them. And it may take a couple of attempts. But the goal is for them to find a replacement activity. So not only are we teaching, we are serving and loving when we make amends in this restoration process, but also what are the words that I could have used instead? Again, use our words, not our hands to communicate. Now, quick caveat, if you live in separate homes, this can be tricky, especially in divorce situations. So this is my suggestion to you is one, your ex-husband, or maybe it's your spouse, but you're living in two separate homes, they may not be on board with you, but you need to explain the process. Eventually, once you model this at home, you need to explain why that's important. And if your significant other, your ex-husband, if they are doing hurtful actions, talk that out with your kids. Like, that's not how we treat people in a community. Now, your daddy's upset because of X, Y, and Z, and that's okay. He's upset about it. But this is what we do when we're upset. So really break it down for them so they understand, like, hey, that's okay that dad's upset about this. But how does it come about? How do we show that frustration and anger? Because again, we want to model for our kids so they know how to handle these situations. And eventually, your husband or your ex-husband may come on board with this. But there are ways that you can continue doing this on your own, even if they're not with you. And your children will begin to observe the differences if you talk openly about this. If you ignore the differences between the homes, if you ignore hurtful behavior, there will be a world of hurt. It is better for you to talk respectfully. I'm a big proponent that we always talk respectfully about the dad. However, that does not mean we're not honest about the situation. Same thing with me. I need to model making amends with my kids. When I blow it, I get upset because there was another science experiment or something that went all over the kitchen, made a big mess. And we have a rule. There's no experiments, no cooking in the kitchen unless you check with mom first. And if they completely disregarded that and they did their experiment, left a mess everywhere, and they went off to someplace else, I can get really upset. And I may blow up. Now, I need to make amends for that. I need to say, hey, listen, mom's frustration over you not picking up your impromptu science experiment and you not asking me, frustration is understandable. However, mom did not show that frustration appropriately when her voice got louder. And I'm sorry about that. Let's redo this again. And I might remodel it and say, hey, so-and-so, can you go ahead and clean up this mess? And let's talk about what to do next time. And there will be many, many, many of these moments that we have to repeat until it becomes into their subconscious. Oh, before I do a volcano experiment, I should check with mom first. So I hope these tips and ideas help you, because this helps with your self-care. As your kids grow and mature and they understand these actions, you are able to invest in your self-care. That's really always what my goal is. When my kids are able to understand these concepts, my ability to care for myself grew. In fact, when I become sick, my kids have learned, mom is sick. She's laying down in bed. We should show her love and care for her. And not out of we must do it or she'll get mad. It's out of, we love mom and we can see she's suffering. And she has done this for us. They have come to that point, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So just to give you encouragement, if you are way at the beginning where I was, this is possible. It takes time, again, to learn about what the skill set, that what you're trying to accomplish. Implement that. Explain to your spouse. And then finally model it with him. And it's amazing how many times this will be effective. And again, even if he decides he does not want to participate, you can still keep doing it. Remember, all your efforts to model loving, kind, and respectful choices will pay off in the long run.
Hey, thank you for joining me today. I pray this episode gave you encouragement to take one small step. If so, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help other women find this show. By the way, if you're loving this conversation and want more encouragement like this, join my email list at bit.ly/myselfcare. That is bit.ly/myselfcare. I have a planner launching soon that will help you put all this into action in your own life. I look forward to chatting with you again next week for another episode.